Hi, I'm Dave Plasko with the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and we are lucky to have with us today the Treasurer of the State of New Jersey, Mr. Andrew Sidamon-Eristoff. Mr. Treasurer, thank you for some of your time on this Tuesday. So I will get right into it with our questions. The first question, we're essentially at the denouement of the budget. Budget season is in full force and it's about to culminate. What can you tell us? What's the state of the state regarding the budget, and how do you feel about how the process went?
So right now we are engaged in a back and forth with the legislative leadership over the details of the budget plan. They've come forward with their proposals. We're reviewing those. Where we can, we're trying to negotiate and discuss the parameters of the budget. But of course, the legislature is coming at it with a fundamentally different orientation than the administration. They've proposed increasing taxes on both business and individuals. So we have a lot of work to do, but I expect over the next 48, 72 hours that we'll gain some greater clarity on it. It's, you asked me how I feel about the budget process as a whole, and I will tell you that it is not a 2-week or 2-month process. This is actually a process that begins in the early fall every year, and it takes roughly 8 months for the process stem to stern. We begin with debriefing all the different agencies, ascertaining their needs, and then we go through multiple public rounds of discussion, hearings, presentations, back and forth. And so fully 8 out of the 12 months every year are spent proposing and disposing of the budget, which really means that we're always in budget season for all intents and purposes. And it's appropriate because it really is the central policy document of state government, any government for that matter. But it is a very long, sometimes seemingly endless process.
Mr. Treasurer, are you concerned about recent reports of the migration of the New Jersey tax base? I've read numbers somewhere at $70 billion over the last decade. Are you concerned about that? And how can we combat that? How can we keep the tax base in New Jersey?
Yes, I'm very concerned about it. I think every New Jerseyan should be concerned with making sure that New Jersey remains competitive as a place to invest, do business, raise a family, go to school, you name it. The fact is that notwithstanding this administration's efforts, we still have a highly uncompetitive tax structure here in New Jersey. We're known broadly as a very high tax jurisdiction. Our property taxes are through the roof, but our business taxes and our individual taxes are also at the very high end of the spectrum, both regionally and nationally, if not internationally. So, I know there are many determinants into location decisions and investment decisions, but clearly taxation is a factor, a major factor. And if New Jersey continues to be an outlier in respect of, say, its gross income tax, or the fact that we have a transfer inheritance tax and an estate tax with a very low threshold, that's a problem for us in dealing with competition from Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, Maryland, and other states in the region. So we have to keep an eye on that. It has to be our priority.
What do you say to financial professionals, tax folks at the society and beyond, who tell their clients, from an estate planning standpoint, don't die in New Jersey, simply put, because of the estate tax situation?
Well, at one level I could say, please don't tell your clients that, because it's not helping the state of New Jersey. But I can't blame these professionals for giving their clients their best advice under the circumstances. And the fact is that at $675,000, our exemption level is completely and totally uncompetitive with our neighbors, and out of sync with the trend nationwide. At a time when New York is matching the federal exemption level of $5 million indexed in the future, and we are still stuck at $675,000. That's a problem. Just this morning I was talking to an attorney who said that in the last week he had 2 couples of modest means come forward and ask him about the estate and transfer inheritance tax. What could they do to mitigate the impact of that tax? They're coming in as clients in order to seek his advice on how to structure their affairs going forward.
For those viewers out there who are watching this video, you may hear the faint sounds of music in the background, and the treasurer tells me that that is a fife and drum corps right outside our window here today in full regalia, commemorating the 350th anniversary of the state of New Jersey. So that's a nice little soundtrack to go with our interview. Mr. Treasurer, what can you tell us about the long-term impact of the millionaires tax, the status, where it's headed, as well as the gasoline tax?
Well, the governor has 3 times vetoed the proposal to add a higher marginal rate at the top of the tax bracket. We feel that is very, very bad policy, mid and long term, an economic disaster for New Jersey. And so I don't anticipate the governor will change his position on that. With respect to the gasoline tax, it is true that we have a relatively low level of tax compared to other states. It's just about the only tax break that New Jerseyans enjoy. The governor has resisted efforts to raise the tax in the past, and my understanding is that he will continue to look on it very skeptically going forward. He's not about raising revenue. He believes that New Jersey has to meet its obligations through spending control.
Is there any activity having the New Jersey tax system piggyback the federal?
Well, we look at this issue both, as a sort of an ongoing technical question, and certainly this issue informed the way we approached some of the tax cuts that were enacted back in 2011. At that time, you'll recall that we adopted changes that were designed to mitigate about 50% of the differential between New Jersey's having a gross income tax versus the national net income tax model, the basing your system on a federal adjusted gross income. So the delta is declining, and we still have 1 year phase-in on that. Nevertheless, I believe long-term that it makes sense for New Jersey to make the transition to a net income tax paradigm, or at least base our tax on adjusted gross income. That being said, the transition is quite challenging from a technical standpoint, especially if you don't want to visit drastic increases or decreases in effective tax rates on individuals and businesses that are taxed as pass-through entities. So we're concerned with how you would design this transition. I think at this point we're committed to continuing to phase in the adjustments that we enacted in 2011, see where that leaves us, see whether that has met our expectations, and then take another look at the federal AGI issue.
Treasurer Eristoff, Governor Christie's decision to change the pension calculation formula led to Fitch, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, so forth, downgrading the state's credit outlook from stable to negative. How does such a downgrade impact New Jersey and its citizens, and what can we do going forward?
Anytime you have a credit downgrade, in theory at least, you'll be subject to slightly higher interest rates on the amounts that you borrow for liquidity and for long-term capital construction and the like. In this interest rate environment, we believe and we think we've experienced a relatively small, minor impact on the cost of finance for our cash flow and for our long-term borrowing needs. Nonetheless, it's obviously something that we keep in mind going forward. I believe that we'll be able to craft a solution to our current challenges that puts us on an appropriate path going forward, and that that will give, I think, some comfort to the rating agencies and other stakeholders that New Jersey's fiscal challenges are being managed affirmatively and appropriately. That being said, this is, for us, yet another clarion call for pensions and health benefits reform. I couldn't do a better job of emphasizing the need for fundamental health benefits and pension reform than to point to the fact that a huge proportion of our year-to-year increase in budget is going to be devoted to pensions and health benefits as well as debt service. So this is a major issue, the issue of the times. We need our partners in the legislature to work with us to revisit this issue and put in place long-term reform that will help New Jersey and New Jerseyans on into the future.
Speaking of the Governor, Treasurer Eristoff, how would you describe your working relationship with Governor Christie?
It's been a wonderful working relationship. The Governor is a very, very quick brief. He is insightful with his questions, supportive, and frankly, just a pleasure to work with and for. And I consider myself extremely lucky to be part of this administration. It's been, I didn't know the Governor before interviewing for the position I now hold. I had no role in the campaign or any prior political association. So I came to this completely fresh, and I have been extremely pleased and gratified with the support that he's given me in my capacity as treasurer.
Can you tell us, I see that you have a long and distinguished career in public service, and you had worked in New York. Tell me, just what's the difference between public service in New Jersey versus New York?
Well, there are many, many differences. I've had the privilege of serving as an elected official in New York City and then appointed to office both in New York City and New York State. All three jurisdictions, counting New Jersey, have a different culture. So there are nuances between the three. The one thing that I have tended to emphasize when people ask me this question is that New Jersey, for whatever reason, historic or otherwise, tends to have a less robust civic infrastructure of sort of non-governmental organizations doing analytic work, data analysis, legal analysis, policy analysis, and the like. And so for me, it was quite interesting stepping out of New York City and New York State, where there are independent non-governmental organizations doing high-quality analytics on every issue you can imagine. Stepping over here into New Jersey, quite frankly, we don't have the same kind of civic community or infrastructure as I mentioned. And we also don't, inside New Jersey, because inside New Jersey's state government, after many decades of challenging budgets, it's been a struggle to maintain the internal analytics as well. So that's, I think, a notable difference in my experience.
For those of our readers and viewers who are accounting students, and there are many, what advice would you give them about pursuing a career in public service?
I certainly hope that any student who reviews this interview will, if they have any interest in public service, pursue it. At least give it a try. And the way I try to speak at public service to young people today is to say it shouldn't be a binary decision. With luck and talent and hard work, you should be able to craft a career in which you have both private sector and public sector exposure and experience. And the time you spend in the public sector will enrich your experience and capacity in the private sector, and vice versa. And I think that maybe is an old-fashioned model, but I think it's an appropriate model, one that my father emphasized when guiding me, and one that I will try to pass along to my own children as they mature and enter the workforce. And I would urge anybody, now at a young stage who is considering a sort of a professional career, to spend some time, maybe not even in government per se, but in public service, which is not always government. I mean, if you live in a suburban community or even an urban community, and you have the time and inclination to serve on a citizens committee, a consultative commission, a zoning board of appeals, a planning committee, anything like that, if you can engage outside of your, say, day-to-day private professional endeavors, I think it enriches your work experience and your professional capacity going forward.
This particular issue of the magazine for our September-October issue is going to focus on soft skills. Just wondered, again, talking about students and young CPAs and young practitioners, young professionals in general, what kind of soft skills do you look for in employees and staff and personnel?
Well, it's actually not rocket science. I place a super premium on the ability to communicate in written form. The ability to clearly and concisely communicate through the written word is, I'm afraid, a dying art, or at least very much underappreciated. In this world of Twitter and email and texting, I think some young people need to be reminded that at the end of the day, what's permanent is what you write and how you present your organized, your ideas, how well they're organized, is critically important to the impression you make on your employer, on your colleagues, but also it's critical to your effectiveness long term. I mean, the really important stuff happens in written form. So I would urge anybody who sees or reviews this to make sure that they not overlook the importance of written communication.
Treasurer Eristoff, just reading about you a little bit, I saw that you've done some business development in the Republic of Georgia. They've had their challenges recently, and we're seeing a lot in the media today about the situation in the Ukraine. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. Why should the U.S. and why should Americans care either geopolitically or economically about what happens in that far corner of the world?
This is the kind of thing that Sally Smith in Rutherford could actually do what I did. Could be a short-term consultant for USAID. I met accountants who were, stationed in Georgia, with E&Y and others, working on these kinds of issues for the Republic of Georgia. Developing, financial systems, tax administration systems. I was personally involved in developing a system of administrative appeals for taxes. Okay. I mean, imagine, a very sophisticated populace, but they had no experience in the concept of, if the tax administration, seeks to collect money and impose a penalty, you have a right, should have a right to administrative relief, and then after that is exhausted, maybe the right to seek legal review, judicial review. All those kinds of things we take for granted, right. But had to be kind of thought up.
Is there anything about you or about the Treasury in New Jersey that someone might not know? An interesting factoid.
There are many curiosities. When I arrived as treasurer, I was interested to find, first of all, remnants of teller windows in my office suite that indicated that there had been, walk-up teller operations. You could pay your taxes by literally going to the State House and paying cash, and there was a vault and that kind of thing here to accept and safeguard the monies. We also have sort of rafters with voluminous card catalogs and other sort of non-standard files. Lord knows what's up on the rafters. The secrets of decades upon decades of operations, maybe dating back to the mid-19th century or earlier. So it's a treasure trove in that respect, and there are secret staircases and basement passages. So it's a rabbit warren in some respects, but it's filled with history. It's a very interesting place to work.
And finally, Mr. Treasurer, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. I know it's budget season. It's a crazy time of year. What do you do to decompress from that? What do you do to relax and have some fun?
Well, I have to confess that I'm an amateur, very amateur musician. I play guitar, mostly flat picking and bluegrass when I gather with friends, and that is a wonderful diversion from my official duties, after my family, of course.
I'd like to thank Treasurer Andrew Sidamon-Eristoff for spending a few minutes with us today. Mr. Treasurer, greatly appreciate it. Thank you for the time and the insight.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure being with you today. I really appreciate it.